The optics for Doug Ford's Greenbelt expansion become worse. I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. For those who are unaware, the Greenbelt is a protected area of green space, farmland, forest, wetlands, and watersheds located in Ontario, and in particular, Southern Ontario, which is very key because that's where the vast majority of residents live. It's prime farmland, and it does a couple other things too, including drainage and even acting as a source of water. And further, it's just a very pretty, natural, scenic area. Historically, the provincial government has taken steps to zone this area off so it couldn't be built over. In fact, they applied very strict zoning criteria, so even if you did own the land there, you wouldn't be permitted to establish any type of housing or manufacturing or any sort of facility aside from something you might need for agricultural output. Now, a separate fact enters the picture here. Southern Ontario, where the Greenbelt is facing a massive housing crunch. Supply is not keeping up with demand at all, and that's generated one of the worst housing bubbles we've ever seen. Now, here comes Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, and he decided to take a certain approach to the Greenbelt. He said, let me slice off some parts of it and allow developers to build houses on that. That might solve the housing crisis. That's what's going through his mind. Now, this strategy assumes that land was the bottleneck and further the core issue here. Now, I'm not so sure that's the case. Other factors like strict municipal zoning, high interest rates, lack of incentives, and even the cost of raw materials arguably play a larger role. And that's maybe why we're seeing the stalling of developments that we're witnessing right now. Housing is not getting built. Now, regardless of whether or not you agree with the strategy of the Ontario government, various controversies have arisen, and I think they float above the strategy itself. You could be in favor of the strategy, you could be against it, but the controversies that have come up are very serious. So, first of all, there were reports and complaints that state the government may have tipped off developers ahead of announcing the plan, with some suggesting that prominent developers who are progressive conservative donors benefit the most. And in particular, what they're talking about is going back to those zoning rules. The Greenbelt land wasn't that expensive, because even if you acquired it, even if you had 100 acres of land that was in the Greenbelt, what could you do with it? You couldn't build on it, you couldn't develop anything, so it wasn't uncommon to be able to purchase land at a massive discount there. Now, imagine you are a developer and you're friends with Doug Ford, or somebody in government, and they whisper in your ear, hey, we're making plans to deregulate some of that land. In fact, here are the areas that we're focusing on. Maybe it's a good idea to pick up that land right now at a discount and witness the massive windfall of that land being able to be built upon. The value would skyrocket. And even from a different perspective, it'd be a massive savings because if you found out that these lands were going to be removed from the Greenbelt protections when everyone else did, there'd be a bidding war for the property. But maybe you're getting the exclusive first shot at it, and only a small group of developers are aware. Therefore, competition isn't so intense, prices remain low, and you benefit greatly, at the expense of, first of all, the current owners of that Greenbelt property, and other developers who just weren't so buddy-buddy with the current government. This is almost like insider trading, and it's unacceptable. So fast forward now, at that point it was only accusations. This week, a major bombshell comes out. Ontario Housing Minister Stephen Clark broke the Members' Integrity Act when carving up the Greenbelt for development, a new report by the province's Integrity Commissioner finds. That headline just came out this week. They published a 166-page report, and quote-unquote, they found the private interest of certain developers were being furthered improperly. So it turns out the accusations were correct. The developers who are very close with Doug Ford, who are very close with Steve Clark, who are very close with Steve Clark's chief of staff, who actually had to resign because of this controversy, were able to get first dibs, were able to take advantage of the situation. Is that putting residents first? Is that prioritizing building houses? Or is that sneaking in corporate interest into your plans? It's a terrible look for the Ontario government. And it's actually disgusting to see this have happened. Now, when Doug Ford was asked to comment, he was very defensive. He ended up actually defending Clark, saying that he wouldn't demand his resignation and that he believes in the housing minister, but they're going to pay more attention going forward. So a terrible response. Doug Ford actually was getting quite aggravated when reporters were pressing him, as they should, for more information. It's just so clear that there was an element of corruption in these dealings. Now, when Clark, the subject of the report, came to speak, he said that he is, quote-unquote, fully committed to fulfilling the government's promise to build at least 1.5 million homes and will ensure the process is done with integrity and trust. Well, if I was in the room, I'd have to ask him, why was it not done with integrity and trust from the beginning? Are you only saying that now because you've been caught? And I'd like to hear his response to that question, because that seems to be the case to me. So now getting back to the strategy discussion, in terms of my opinion, I personally disagree with the idea of opening up the Greenbelt. Just drive around many of the cities outside of Toronto in southern Ontario. There is plenty of land there, and land that's already zoned for residential development. The premise just isn't correct, that we need more land right now. We have that. It's just not being built upon in the right ways. It would be different if we were Hong Kong, for example. If we were landlocked by mountains. If we actually had nowhere to expand outwards, and we fully maximized our vertical real estate space. That's not the case across most of southern Ontario. Even in Toronto itself, that's not the case. There's tons of opportunity. There are other barriers that seem more pressing. The free market will act if profits can realistically be achieved. And because we seem to be only focusing on private development, they have to have the profit incentive. Interest rates being so high are obviously causing issues. Perhaps the government can create a low-interest borrowing fund to spur development, or even build some housing themselves. Another idea is looking at municipalities. They're also to blame for their often short-sighted planning. They've often prioritized low-density building over high-rise opportunities, because small pockets of residents like to complain about their views being obstructed. It seems clear to me that we need market incentives. And even if you think that opening up the Greenbelt is going to be that incentive, you have to be far more specific. I don't see that coming from the government of Ontario. For example, you have these developers buying up the land. How are you going to ensure they meet your housing requirements? Or are they free to do something like build mega mansions and cottages there? If they do that, it's not going to do too much to hitting this goal of ours, the over 1 million housing units that we do need. What we have to do is reduce costs and make building easier, without picking corporate favorites. We need to encourage construction from both existing and new companies. And if that's not happening, the government has to get involved. We need to focus on density and, together with that, continue to expand our transit systems to build infrastructure so individuals can expand the range of what they consider to be realistic living. If you can get to Toronto from a further out community quickly, maybe you'll be open to moving out there, expanding the radius of accommodation. That's another way we can actually resolve the housing issue, create more space without encroaching on the Greenbelt. This government maybe had good intentions, I doubt that, but even looking at the strategy itself, I fail to see the logic of what's happening. The ethics report further cast doubt on the integrity of the current government, and it's just disappointing. We have a real big issue here, but greed, buddies of current ministers and politicians are being prioritized. But I am hopeful that having the spotlight cast on them will get them to shape up, be more careful, and avoid further corruption. Otherwise, their jobs are going to be on the line next election cycle. If Doug Ford fails to get results, I'm pretty sure he'll be done for. Now, with that, it does bring us to the end of our conversation for today. If you enjoyed the material, be sure to leave a review and share. They'll help us grow. And you can find me online at perryplatform.org and on social media at perryplatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.